All right, everybody, welcome back to Patriot Pravda podcast, and this is episode 12.
Welcome.
So today we're going to talk about some interesting things. First, we're going to have a clip from Pastor Russ from Pursuit Northwest Church up in Washington, talking about some laws that are being passed by Washington State, or I should say trying to be passed. And it's concerning because they're laws in support of all the transgender stuff that is going on across states here in the U.S. We're going to talk about that briefly, discuss what things are going on and what we need to be fighting against as believers in this country and what we need to be focused on. Also,
today we've got something special for you. Might make your ears bleed, so I will warn you ahead of time. Wear earplugs.
All right, and we'll be ready for it.
Welcome to Patriot Pravda.
Oh, yeah.
To me in a voice so sweet, I thought I heard the shuffle of angels' feet. He called my name when my heart stood still. When he said, "Man, go do my will, go tell that long-tongued lie."
All right, so yeah, we're back.
Welcome.
Yes. So, we're going to talk briefly about some of the stuff that's been going on. And I just want to actually ask quickly, like, what has been your opinion so far on just what we've been seeing as far as, like, all of the transgender ideology that we're seeing kind of spread throughout everywhere in this country? Because it's not just relegated to, higher education anymore. It's not just in the colleges. It's
right.
Something that's spread so far and so wide.
Well, it's obviously taking off. It seems to be a fad right now, but there seems to be a more sinister thing behind this.
Mm-hmm.
It's very difficult to prove that there's a sinister thing behind it, concretely, but just, being a Christian, you can kind of tell that there's something weird going on behind it all, because it's just, they're disseminating down this virus to the to the youngest people.
Yeah. It's kind of went from the colleges where people were, being taught this by, professors that came out of kind of that free love movement in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
And it's kind of worked its way into
everyday households now.
Yeah. It went from just LGBTQ and kind of went down this slippery slope into transgenderism, which after the advent of John Money continued to just get worse as far as higher education goes. And then those folks that were in colleges, in our generation, millennial generation, they've taken this from college now and are integrating it into younger and younger groups of people and trying to pull it into, the elementary school classroom.
But even in the last 5 to 7 years, it's just exploded.
Yeah.
It really wasn't talked about that much. Let's just go back to, say, 2010 or 2015. I don't recall it being such a hot topic.
No, and it wouldn't have been, because you said 2013, 2015?
2010 to 2015, it really wasn't. It started to come out of the woodwork around 2015.
Right, and in 2010 even, the whole LGBTQ thing was still pretty taboo. You still had a lot of what they would say classical Democrats that were still, albeit not too many at that point, but there were still some that were against same-sex marriage. And
right.
And so far, it's just drifted so far from that now. Now we see in legislation in some states, they're forming, state legislators are writing laws and trying to pass laws that allow what they call transgender children, which in my personal opinion isn't a thing,
Right.
I think it's on the parents to instill in their child what they are, especially if you're a Christian parent. You should be teaching your child, this is how God made you, and God didn't make a mistake when he made you. He knew what he was doing. He knew that he formed you the way he wanted you because you have a purpose. You're fearfully and wonderfully made, and there's not a mistake in how you were formed.
Right. I think the whole gender identity thing that is, you see a lot of these kids, these parents that are talking about, or teachers or anything like that, talking about kids with gender identity issues. I don't
Right.
think that a lot of kids would normally have gender identity issues. They would just grow
Well,
into
no.
who they are.
And the
But
thing,
I think they're caused to question their own identity because people are making them question it.
right, and a lot of the parents are causing this because I think it's almost like a delayed it's like a delayed form of rebellion. I think coming from parents who felt like they couldn't freely and openly say things that they were thinking or learning about, because back then I think that's why this was kind of all
Yeah, there was kind of
it's
a stigma. There was a stigma attached to it back
right.
then. So yeah, maybe you're right on that.
And so they're living vicariously through their children, because what kid at 3 years old thinks that because they play? And I was just watching a video today where a mother was talking about how her son, her daughter, was, how they knew that she was transgender when she started playing with a certain type of toy, and then she wanted to eat more green vegetables, and the mother was making the argument that these green vegetables are, sorry, I should say green vegetables, not vegetables. They're not an animal. The green vegetables have cause higher testosterone, and basically she was claiming that the child knew this, and that's why the child was asking to eat more green vegetables. And it was odd that the child wanted more green vegetables, because typically kids don't like to eat green vegetables. And so she took that as the child crying out and telling her that the child wanted to be a boy, that the child was transgender. And this child wasn't even 3 years old yet. And so that's what I'm saying.
I
Like,
really don't have any memories of being 3 years old. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Like I can assume I was only probably concerned with Matchbox cars at that
Right.
point in time, and a couple other odds and ends. But you know, I have no, you have no real conscious thought
Right.
to a degree.
My only memory I have from that age bracket is running around in the front yard of a house that we used to live in, a long time ago, with my older sister and our German Shepherd. And I remember getting knocked over by our dog because she was a big German Shepherd, But that's like the only memory I have from that age.
Right. There's
That's
no way
vivid, that I
that
know.
you know of anything. I mean, you don't even really know that you're male or female, but you're going.
It wasn't even a thing.
Yeah, it wasn't a thing. Your biology dictates kind of what you're going to do anyway.
You don't even form a concept of.
Yeah, and it's not important.
Yeah, you don't even
Just be a kid. Yeah.
You don't even form a concept of boy or girl until you get to preschool, where they say, this is the little girl's room, this is the little boy's room.
Right.
And,
But I'm sure you kind of innately know anyway. Once you start, getting older, 4, 5, 6. Okay, they're
Right.
different. They dress different. They act different. They speak different. They look different. Because I remember my first attraction to a female was probably when I was around 5 or 6 years old.
right. But the thing is, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, these kids they're not. And this woman claimed that her child came to her at 3 years old.
Well,
and
then
said,
they're off their
I
rocker.
want to be a boy. And she said, and my son knew what he needed. My daughter knew what she needed to be a boy, and that's why she was asking for these things. And I was just like, this is wild. And you know that it's coming from the parent. All these parents are, because this is why the whole grooming thing is being echoed so much now, is because these adults are convincing these children that they don't know, because these adults are also misled and don't know.
Yeah.
And so since they're fooled, they're fooling now children into believing that this is something that's unsettled science and we don't know, and you could be whoever you want to be. And it's just not the case.
Yeah, it's pretty sad.
And the thing is,
They're irreversibly damaging these children.
right. And the thing
100%.
is, because there are parents that are not fighting against this, and there is also parents that are fighting for it, we see legislation being created in certain states and areas where the state or the government is now trying to gain rights to your children and do things with your children without your knowing. And so and this was really prevalent in California when my wife and I lived there. It was very obvious that the state viewed your children as their children, and the schools especially. Oh boy, that was huge in the schools in California. The teachers unions say that those children are our children.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm sorry, no, that's my child. I mean, I'm not a parent yet, but still, like, you don't tell me my child is your child. You can't do that.
Right.
And so now we see this, and recently there was a law that they were trying to pass in the state of Washington that would take your child from you if your child wanted to get gender affirming care. And that's also an oxymoron of a statement, because if it was gender affirming care, then it would be affirming the gender that they were created as, you know?
Right.
So it's gender denying care, really, is what it is.
Well, how do these people not see? Well, I mean, I know why they don't see it. It's willful blindness,
Right.
On the part of where they're, taking these healthy bodies and destroying them to satisfy some fad or some short-lived idea in their head that was planted there.
Right. And the whole thing with,
Or it could have to do, and honestly, why are they doing it to children? Is it like a sexually perverted way of looking at the child? Yeah, I think so.
yeah.
The child, especially if they're 3-4 years old, they have no concept of human sexuality and
And this is where
intimate relationships. So
right.
how do they even know? And there's that one girl, Chloe Cole, I believe is her name, has been so damaged that she can't even have a normal, intimate sexual relationship with somebody.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's so many stories of that and the same thing.
Yeah.
So many same stories of people that have gone through this just mess, this kind of money grab system where doctors and these people they're making so much money by creating
And here's the thing.
lifelong customers.
Yeah, they're not just taking them in, chewing them up, and spitting them out. They're taking them in and chewing them for the rest of their lives and then spitting them out. So it's a life full of chewing, aka a life full of pain.
Yeah, it's creating a constant consumer base through medical procedure, because once you go through some of these medical procedures, you have to be constantly monitored. You have to, I mean, I know I was taking certain medications that the VA was giving me when I was really struggling with like depression and PTSD and stuff like that. And when I was taking those medications, I had to always be going to the VA hospital to always go get blood tests, and so they could test me and make sure they weren't overdosing me on this certain medication, and making sure that these two medications were working in conjunction well, and things like that. And it was such a mess. I had to just get rid of all of it. I just completely get off everything, because it was really causing me, in my case, it was really causing me a lot of problems. And I don't think they were making good decisions as far as the amount of different medications that I was on at the same time. But that kind of thing happens with these folks that are struggling with this type of gender dysphoria, where they constantly have to be on certain types of medications, and when they go through procedures, they have to be on other kinds of medications, and then having to deal with the mix of hormones, and then the effectiveness of certain medications because of the difference in the hormone treatments and things like that. It creates this web of constant issues that this person's body is always going through. And then some of these hormones, if men take them in order to become a woman, they create other issues. They contribute to other bone density and fragility issues. They cause certain types of cancers. Increased estrogen in a male can create certain types of cancers that'll kill a man. And so you're basically, through this whole medical practice, injecting cancer and other harmful things into your bloodstream in order to become a woman. You're becoming a person who has to be under constant medical supervision, and it's a cash grab. These people are victimized in a cash grab, and it's sad.
Yeah, I wouldn't even call, for a lot of these children, I wouldn't even call what they have gender dysphoria. They've got induced gender confusion.
Yeah,
gender dysphoria is I think a real thing for some people who have mental trauma or mental issues that may think they're one thing and not. and that
I think
could
there
be a
are
valid issue. But I think the percentage is in the, maybe 5 out of 1 million, or 1 out of 100,000
Yeah, I
might
think
actually have
there are
that.
genuine folks out
For
there
sure.
that do have that.
But these kids and these teens have adult-induced gender confusion.
Right. Yeah, they're convinced because those that surround them are doing the convincing.
Sure. Yeah.
And anyway, to get back, we have a clip from Pastor Russ from the church up in Washington called Pursuit, and he's discussing a bill that they're attempting to pass in Washington that would take, if your child is the age of 13 or older, would allow the child to seek gender-affirming treatment, and they would be able to legally leave the care of the parent, go into a government facility, and receive gender-affirming care without the parent's knowledge. And so we're going to go ahead and watch this video and, just listen to it.
This emergency broadcast is not a drill.
Hey friends, Pastor Russ here. I wanted to bring you an important political update from the Washington State Legislature. Frankly, I wish it was better news than it actually is. For nearly 10 years of my life, I was heavily involved in the public policy field in our region. From congressional campaigns to referendums, lobbying, and voter engagement, I've worked in nearly every facet of the political system in our state. See, the family unit is the first governmental system God ever ordained. And any legislation that seeks to do violence against the institution of...
Now, that's actually really important. I do want to talk about that briefly. The family is the first kind of small governmental system that has like a set of rules, and there's a structure too. I mean, I guess that's what he means by governmental system. Is there are designated positions, there's a designated structure or hierarchy. There's a reason for that structure. God made that with a purpose, and so that's what he means when he's talking about that, and that's true. God did create the structure of the family with a purpose and for a reason. Anyway, continuing.
Ever ordained. And any legislation that seeks to do violence against the institution of the family unit must be forcefully rejected by common sense people everywhere. In January of this year, Senate Bill 5599 was introduced in the state legislature. This bill would allow children as young as 13 who are confused about their gender to leave their home, seek shelter at a government facility, and receive permanent and irreversible gender-affirming treatment and surgery, all without their parents' knowledge or consent.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, I fail to understand how any sane adult, I mean, it's like you go to the school nurse and you can't even get, an Advil, or something along those lines without a parent's consent or knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But they're going to take your kids from you and perform surgeries and give them all kind of hormone treatment against your knowledge, against your will, and they're not going to tell you where your child is. And I'm not a parent yet, but this rubs me the wrong way, and it makes me wonder when parents are really going to stand up and say enough is enough. I mean, even if you are someone who would identify yourself as a Democrat, or who's been classically liberal throughout your entire life, when is too much too much? When has that line been crossed when you're going to say, enough is enough? They're going to come and take my kids from me, and then against my will, against my knowledge.
Right.
I mean,
well, this line was crossed years ago with a number of other different issues, but that's neither here nor there right now.
Yeah, of course. Well, let's continue and finish out this.
Let me be clear. SB 5599 represents the most radical and dangerous piece of anti-family, anti-Christ legislation that we have seen in the last 40 years. In Washington State, it's against the law for a minor to use a tanning bed. It's against the law for a minor to get a tattoo. It's against the law for a minor to enter into a legally binding contract. It's against the law for a minor to buy tobacco products, and the list goes on and on. But at the age of 13, If you want to permanently damage your body through gender reassignment surgery, start taking puberty blockers, and irreversibly harm your reproductive system, the state will house your child in a private government facility, prescribe medicine, and perform surgery, and then refuse to give you information about their whereabouts. Oh, and by the way, they would fund this with your tax dollars. Friends, this is an all-out demonic assault on parents, children, and the family unit. And that brings us to today. SB 5599 is sitting on the governor's desk awaiting his signature. Yeah, I don't know if we have a shot at stopping this bill, but friend, we're going to try. Every Christian and common sense person in this state should be outraged.
And I'm going to stop it there. And I think that it goes farther than that. I think every Christian and every common sense person in the country should be outraged by what's going on.
Sure.
And not just, and I'm not just saying outrage like feigning outrage, and I'm not saying outrage like just posting about it on social media, because anybody could be a keyboard warrior, from a distance. But I'm talking about you should be emboldened and encouraged to actually do something about it. Actually call your local legislator. Actually speak to somebody over the phone.
Yeah.
Send a letter if you're still doing that these days, and get in touch with folks and get loud, get involved in local politics, get involved in your local school board, and actually make a difference.
Yeah, here's the thing, though. Well, I think if you started making phone calls, let's just start here. If you started writing letters, I don't think they would ever get answered.
Right.
These people have infiltrated the government in these senates and these state governments and these local governments so deeply now. I think the letter would more or less just wind up in the trash. Phone calls, maybe you'd get somewhere, but I think they just write it off. I think we're almost in too deep, it's gone too far. I agree with you. I entirely agree, because how else, if you just sit back and ignore it, well, it's only going to get worse. But there has to be some sort of consequence. I mean, I'm not advocating violence here, and I would strongly suggest against that. But what else can you what else is there to do? You have to.
And I agree with you. I think we are far in. I mean, we're far enough in that us, two married men that don't have children yet, that are still relatively young, are the ones having this conversation.
Yeah.
We're the ones bold enough to create a system to where we could project our voice in order to discuss this issue, to build something, a kind of maybe even a small megaphone that we have. We don't have that huge of a following, but still,
right,
we're willing enough to
publicly get it out there.
Discuss this thing. Yeah. But why? How did it get to us?
Because those in power didn't care, and those that cared weren't in power.
Well, yeah, but and then who are the ones in power? It's not just the government; it's the people.
Yeah.
The people in this country have been asleep for so long, and I don't say asleep in the concept of wokeness and seeing truth for what it
Well, we were distracted.
Innocuous term.
I mean, it's been a long time coming. It's been steps to get to this point. I mean,
right?
It's no longer a father going to work and and mom stays home and takes care of the children and raises them. And, the educational system was either homeschooling or very local and, a lot of conservative values. And there was prayer in schools. I'm talking about like the late 40s and the 50s, and then all of a sudden prayer got taken out of school in 62. And then, families started falling apart slowly but surely. And then those that didn't, mom and dad had to go to work to provide because prices were going up. The kids were left more or less alone. Then they started injecting, and people forgot about the school system. They thought, okay, it was okay when I was in, so I can send my kid there and get an education. And then they just snuck little things into the curriculum over time. And then, you wind up in the 80s. It's still kind of the same. And then they started accelerating it in the 90s. And then kids went unchecked. There was the sex education. There was, a lot of, the self, the going after pleasure in all facets of life.
Yeah. The only reason why we know what's in the school system now, I would say a big proponent of us learning that now is because of the advent of COVID.
For sure, yeah.
Parents of all the schooling from home and that people have had to do, schooling in place, parents were able to see how these teachers are interacting with their children at home, through technology in order to teach their classes. And
I don't even think that was all of it.
Right. And that was with these teachers or these people that were trying to teach this junk to kids, that they were even toning it down and pulling back a little bit to try to make it not as obvious.
Yeah, I don't think we saw more than 40% of what they were going after in the classroom.
But the thing is, we've been so fooled and made comfortable by the bread and circuses of life. We've become complacent as a rich, comfortable nation, not having to fight for certain things.
Yeah. What it was is nobody checked on things. Nobody did the due diligence. They just assumed that it was going to be fine.
Right, and then that's why we have a lot of problems.
Yeah, government, from the very tippy top of government all the way down to your local preschool.
Right. It's not just the whole transgender movement, but it ties into everything with why our Constitution is so trampled on nowadays.
Yeah.
We're having this Second Amendment discussion about should they be allowed to ban AR-15s, but I'm sitting here wondering, hey, why did you guys allow background checks? Where was that a thing? At least that's my opinion on that.
Yeah.
Like,
I can see that.
We went from shall not be infringed, allowed to buy and own warships, cannons, things of that nature, military-grade weaponry of that time, and that's what the Founding Fathers designed it to be, because, people wrote into them. People asked them, hey, if I'm transporting these goods from this place to this place by boat, am I allowed to put a cannon on my boat so I can defend it? Is that what this Second Amendment means? And the Founding Fathers were like, yeah, how about go buy 5 cannons? It wasn't, oh, can I have this pistol brace?
Right.
Can this, is it okay if I have this binary trigger or not? No. It was, let me have that Sherman over there.
Right. Well, they got all of a sudden, I don't know where this whole started, deteriorating into this permissions thing. And somehow you need a permit for weapons in certain places. Yeah, I don't know how it deteriorated into this. You don't want the bad guys to have guns, but at the same time, if you let it go unchecked, let's just say it was hands off, there were no permitting, the bad guys would be kept in check. I think a lot. I think there wouldn't be very many bad guys with guns because the good guys with guns would put them down.
Yeah.
That's my honest opinion. If you're a felon and you have a gun, you're not supposed to have it, but the chances are you're going to go do something again bad with it. But a good guy with a gun is going to put you down. Might end up dead. Well, too bad. I guess you shouldn't have done that.
Right.
That type of thing. I agree with you on that. The shall not be infringed is absolute for sure. But we let it get to somehow previous generations let it get to this point.
That's what I'm saying. There were allowance and there were trade-offs and allowances that were made along this whole process.
Yeah, they did it in the guise of safety. For sure.
It's just like the Patriot Act.
Yeah.
For safety reasons, we're going to trade a little bit of our freedom to allow the government to do certain things, but it's not. And the government says we're going to give this back.
No, they never do.
It back. But anyways, we kind of went on a rabbit trail. But yeah, it's frustrating, but we still have to be willing to stand up and call it what it is.
Yeah. I still think there's hope. For example, the Roe v. Wade reversal, back to the states. I think that's a glimmer of hope. In certain, maybe not for the entirety of the thing, but there's still semi-reasonable people. Yeah,
there is. I think there still is hope. Like the concept of having a republic, if we can keep it. I think that is still alive, but I will say, in thinking about the greater aspect of things, like the 100,000 foot view and kind of maybe even a biblical aspect of things, the closer we get to the end of time, I think the more wild things are going to get here.
Sure.
And so I'm hoping that there is hope for it to get better and that we're not as close to the end, because no one wants to see that. But at the same time, I'm not sure. And and I think as believers, sometimes we have that kind of struggle now. We're especially if we're active believers and we're, spending time in scripture and we're spending time in prayer and we're observing what's going on in the world today, and we're wondering about what that means, and should we be wanting things to get better in the country? And
I see what you're saying.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I am of the same kind of thought group on that.
Obviously, and I don't mean wanting things to get better. Like we want things to get
Sure, we don't want people to suffer unnecessarily across the board, saved, unsaved, trans, not trans, whatever. I don't want people to suffer at all. But you look at the old civilizations of old, Greece, the Romans, and others. They got so big and so wealthy and so comfortable and easy. Life was easy that they just descend into just pleasures of all kinds.
Right.
And then that sin gives birth to death. And it's not just personal death. It's not just human death. It's not just animal death. It's the death of your family. It's the death of your country. It's the death of the land. It's the death of everything.
Right.
In that general area. And God brings righteous judgment on that because he can't let it continue. So we might not even be near the end of time, per se, near the end of judgment. We might be near the end of this era. This might be the Roman Empire 2, per se, or Greece, the Empire of Greece 2, per se. We don't know how long time is going to go on for. We just don't.
Right, which is why I think that even if we're working our way to the end, we should still be fighting for truth.
For good, yes, absolutely.
For good, for biblical truth.
Yeah.
We should still have that hope. We should still pray for those in power. We should still push and fight for that good, for that biblical truth.
Yeah, because you don't want people to die in their sins and their evil and their wickedness.
Right.
You want to get as many out as possible to save them from that. And the only way to do that is to keep pushing for the good, for the moral.
Yeah.
I think anyway.
Yeah.
And just delaying, maybe it's a delay of the inevitable, but God has spared, his hand. He has been, just about ready to I don't know the scripture off the top of my head, but he was going to destroy, and then God changed his mind due to the prayers of a man, the requests of a man. I'd have to look that up. I apologize for not knowing that off the top of my head, but he is slow to anger, but when he chooses to act, it's a righteous anger, but he can change his mind, per se. I don't know if you could say that God, we could get into a theological debate where did God really change his mind? You know what I'm saying? Is like,
I know what you're saying.
Yeah, but it does say in the scripture that God changed his mind about destroying people. And Nineveh. I mean, take a look at Nineveh. He was going to rain down destruction upon them if they did not repent. And the whole story of Jonah. And Jonah didn't want to go, but God didn't want. He ended up forcing Jonah to go there through multiple steps to get them to repent, because he knew they would, but they needed to be pushed to repent, and they did, and he spared them
for a time. They
did. Yeah, but I mean, for a time, sure, but
they got destroyed later.
But it was delayed, and those
Right.
and who knows, maybe those who repented, some of those individuals that lived in the city of Nineveh repented and were like, I'm never going back to that. I'll serve God, and they left that city, and they never went back to their wicked ways.
Yeah, there were people that were saved because of, and I think that's why God, is, and we've heard a pastor talk about this frequently. Is God is willing to wait in order for others to continue to be saved. That's why I don't think the end is racing toward us as fast as what a lot of people believe.
Right.
Because I think God is patient, and he's long suffering because he's willing to still rein in more to him. He doesn't want to see anybody just, walk into hell without a chance of ever being saved.
Right.
And and
And
praise God for it.
And there's, thousands of children being born every day.
Yeah.
And they need a chance,
Yeah. But that's
out of one subject into another.
Issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I have for you today, and I'm not going to make your ears bleed right this second, but I will give you a warning. This is an article from the New York Times. Guard who fatally shot man at a Walgreens won't be charged, prosecutor says. And this, quote, a security guard at Walgreens in San Francisco will not be charged with murder after he fatally shot a man who was accused of shoplifting, the district attorney said this week. In a statement on Monday, the district attorney, Brooke Jenkins, said that prosecutors could not prove beyond reasonable doubt to a jury that the guard was guilty of a crime after they reviewed statements from witnesses and the guard, along with video footage on the April 27th episode at a store on Market Street. The evidence clearly shows that the suspect believed he was in mortal danger and acted in self-defense. Mr. Jenkins said in the statement, or Miss Jenkins said in the statement, referring to the private security guard who was identified by the San Francisco Police Department as Michael Earl Wayne Anthony, 33 years old. Although Miss Jenkins called the killing of the man Banco Brown a tragedy, she said, we cannot bring forward charges when there is credible evidence of reasonable self-defense. Doing so would be unethical and create false hope for a successful prosecution. Now, this person who was shot did pass away. The decision by the prosecutor to not bring charges infuriated activists and friends who knew Mr. Brown, whom they identified as a black trans man who struggled with homelessness. So there are trans activists.
How many wickets in the victim hierarchy are we going to hit?
Oh, we're going to hit a lot of them here. So next, so that happened. So then there was a group of people who went to the Board of Supervisors in San Francisco. Trans activist shrieks at San Francisco Board of Supervisors. This is from Yahoo News. Leah McGeever, an LGBT activist, vociferously condemned the San Francisco Board of Supervisors following the decision by District Attorney Brooke Jenkins to decline to prosecute a security guard that shot and killed a transgender shoplifter on last Thursday. So I'm going to play this video for you.
All right.
Be forewarned. I think, yes.
Imagine that! I hate this! I hate what you've done to us! I hate what you're doing to us! I hate you, Board of Supervisors! I hate you, London Breed! I hate you, Jenkins!
Wow, that was such an influential, formed, fantastic argument. Yeah, it worked for Goku, but I don't know if it works in this instance.
Yeah, there was more to it before that, but just for the sake of this argument, that makes people shut down. They completely ignore. I mean, I would.
Yeah.
Be like, get out, you child.
Yeah, you have to.
Yeah,
I don't want to. Yeah, I don't have. I don't have anything.
But that's
to say
that's where
on that.
we're at. But it's like, why they're defending this guy? I mean, the guy was a shoplifter. Now we haven't seen the video, but I mean, if the San Francisco District Attorney is not going to charge the man with murder or anything because it was a self-defense, I mean, that's got to be telling you something. Because
if the San Francisco DA is not going to go after the guy,
then that means that there's pretty good exculpatory evidence that he acted in self-defense, legitimate self-defense.
Yeah.
And then, but that's not good enough. They want him, they basically want him, this poor security guard, crucified. And then they're calling for, it goes on in this article to say that they're calling for an end to armed security. There's nothing in the Walgreens worth someone's life. Well, I agree with that. But at the same time, he shot him and killed him not because of the things he was stealing.
How many companies and stores need to leave these areas?
Yeah.
so people can't work until people get it through their heads. That's not good. When you walk into a Walgreens or a Walmart or a CVS somewhere and literally everything is behind glass.
Yeah,
because people can't walk into the store without walking out with stuff.
Right. I've seen that happen where we live.
Right.
And it's not even that compared to down there, it's not even that bad. But
Right.
I mean, it said the day after or days after the shooting or the unfortunate event, days later, protesters held a rally and demanded the pharmacy retail chain store fire the guard. Quote, "It's insane that Walgreens has armed security. There's nothing in that store worth a human life. And Walgreens is not taking care of our community," unquote. Jessica Nolan of the Young Women's Freedom Center told a local Fox affiliate on Monday.
Okay,
Quote,
okay.
Quote, "We demand an end to armed security," unquote.
If she knows, if that Walgreens does nothing for that community, then I think she needs to get a list of how many people in that community get their pharmaceuticals from that Walgreens and go door to door and speak to however many thousand people that is in that community and have them each tell her what that Walgreens does for them.
Yeah.
How many people in that community live with diabetes, which is very big in, the inner city communities?
Right. And I bet you that Walgreens handed out millions of dollars in free COVID shots that they were, harping on everybody to get back then.
Right.
And still are now. But, that's what I mean.
If they do, obviously we know that argument that this Walgreens does nothing for our community is a horrible
right
argument that has no ground in any kind of truth.
Further on in the article, San Francisco has struggled to combat crime and theft in recent years. Whole Foods closed its central location in early April following deteriorating safety conditions. Tuesday, Nordstrom joined the corporate exodus from the city, closing both the San Francisco locations, citing rampant stealing.
Yep.
Quote, "A growing number of retailers and businesses are leaving the area due to the unsafe conditions for customers, retailers, and employees, coupled with the fact that these significant issues are preventing an economic recovery of the area," unquote. A spokesman for the Uniball Rodamco Westfield, a commercial real estate group, told the San Francisco Standard following the announcement.
Yeah, I mean, Target and Walmart are also on their way out in that area.
Yeah.
And
it's just too much. They can't.
REI,
their
REI
insurance
completely
company
left Portland.
Oh, did they?
They're out.
Yeah, yep. And their insurance companies must be basically forcing them to get out.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's got to be
because they can't afford it.
Yeah. It's either this, the insurance company can't afford to keep paying for that stuff unless the rates go up, and the companies can't afford the rates. So it's almost a mutual thing where it's like, well, we're going to have to leave.
They come into agreement and they're like, yeah, there's no reason for us to stay here.
It's just stop loss.
Right. Yeah, it's just a mess, and like you're saying, they're trying to make this guard, they're trying to turn him into a murderer, and we see the same thing happening with the recent case in New York City. I don't know if you have seen recently, Subway in New York.
The Subway, yeah.
There was a gentleman, I think his last name was Neely, was homeless street performer known for doing Michael Jackson impersonations, but he was acting erratic on a New York subway. Big surprise there. That always happens because people have allowed that kind of stuff for so long in New York City. But he was acting very erratic, was saying that he was hungry, no one cared, he didn't think anyone cared, and so he doesn't care, he's willing to die for it, and he's threatening people, saying that he was going to do something and he doesn't care if he dies. And he started acting really erratic, and there was a Marine Corps veteran on the subway that morning, and there were a couple other folks that decided they're going to subdue this man until police can get there and take the guy. And in subduing this man passed away, and now people everywhere are trying to find out who this Marine veteran was. Because he was white, this has become a race issue. Completely ignore the fact that the other folks that were also trying to subdue the man were not white, but because there was a white person involved, this is a race issue. And so now this is becoming George Floyd 2.0. And they said that this Marine vet is a murderer and needs to be put on trial for murder. And, same kind of thing. And the thing is, it took the police they didn't even end up coming.
Really?
Until EMS and police eventually got there, at the same time. It took them well over 15 minutes to get there.
Yeah, because there are police cutbacks and the mass exodus of police leaving New York City because they can't properly police. Now, I have my qualms with how police are these days anyway, but that's beside the point. There's so few of them now that their response time is astronomical.
Yeah. Yeah, they didn't end up showing up until the guy was already.
So let's pretend that this guy started going on a rampage and nobody stopped him, and that Marine was in there and nobody stopped him, and he started hurting people, and chopping people up or doing something rampant on the train, breaking windows. Who knows what he was capable of?
Yeah.
So that still means that the police response time was 15 minutes away.
Yeah. In the last year, we've had 25 people murdered by homeless folks just pushing them onto the subway tracks in New York City.
Yeah.
This year?
Yeah. That's unbelievable. And are those people being prosecuted?
No.
The homeless people who were doing the pushing, first of all, do they even know who they are?
Well, some of them no, some of them yes.
Okay.
I shouldn't just say no. Some of them have been picked up and are getting whatever's coming to them, but there are a lot that aren't. And so, people in the city are now just like it was with George Floyd, they're now rioting.
Great.
They're now throwing a fit in New York City. They're demonstrating and standing in on subway platforms, stopping up subways.
They're willing to do all this stuff for a guy who's dead, but they wouldn't take care of him. They wouldn't look him, at him twice, probably beforehand.
And get this. So it's not like this was just a one-time thing, and this guy has never been in trouble with police. Again, it's one of these cases where this guy is 40. I think I said 42, 46, or 7. Like 47 prior run-ins.
Jeez.
Several assault convictions, and so we have this system where.
Assault convictions? We're going to have to look that up. Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
I mean, I don't think all of them were assault convictions.
Right,
but I'm saying,
regardless, yeah.
A plurality of them were. And
so this guy was not a nice guy generally. I mean, sure, he was a great performer, street performer, awesome, good for him. But, I mean...
I've seen, there are videos of his street performances, and
no.
It wasn't a very convincing Michael Jackson. Yeah, it says, Neely, 30, had been arrested a staggering 42 times in the past decade. And he was most recently arrested in November 2021 on felony assault charges for slugging a 67-year-old female stranger in the face. And the woman reportedly had serious injuries from the attack, and Neely was jailed for over a year. But then was obviously again released and let back out on the street. And
yeah, so he would have done something again if he had went unchecked in that particular instance.
So this is also another greater issue where we're seeing just how many repeat offenders.
Right.
These people get locked up so many times in their life. They're let back out, locked up again, let back out, locked up again. And it's, I think after time 42, you go, okay, well, you're not getting...
Well, who's the judge behind this, too? Like
grasping something here.
Yeah. Who's the judge behind these, this is your 38th time. Let's I'll
time
give you
57.
Yeah, like
this is the one. You got it this time.
You got to get this one this time, buddy. I believe in you. I'm going to give you a slap on the wrist, 6 months or whatever it is, and we'll see you again. Or hopefully not. I don't know. But it's just like, how many times is this going to happen before? Like I said, who's the judge behind this? Or multiple judges? I mean, like, they can see the record.
They're New York City judges. And, oh, boy. Yeah.
If only Frank Sinatra knew when he sang that song.
I think...
now it's a cesspool.
It was a different New York back then.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I've been to New York City. I believe I was there in 2009. I've been there several times. And, it was okay then, I guess. But I didn't feel unsafe.
Yeah, I think last time I was there was probably 2002. Still back in the
Cleanup days.
yeah, the America's mayor who was Giuliani.
Rudy Giuliani, yeah.
Back in the Giuliani days. Oh yeah. Yeah. So even then it wasn't as bad as it is now.
For sure. I don't know, New York City seems to have these cycles because it was bad in the 70s.
Yeah.
Kind of started coming out in the 80s. It was bad in the early 80s. Started getting better in the mid to late 80s, and it was decent in the 90s for the most part. And
Yep.
early 2000s, apart from the attack. I think New York really came together really well, as tragic as the September 11th attacks were. I think New York City came together really well during that time.
Oh yeah, because everyone was still
United against,
Yeah.
And trying to help one another out. But and then you go 20 years into the future,
we was New Yorkers. And
22 years into the future, and people are shoving each other onto railroad tracks.
Yeah, and playing the knockout game in the street,
Yeah.
just beating up on old folks.
Well,
Yeah, what a mess.
pray for our nation, everybody. Pray for each other.
Yeah, and more than even that, pray for your local leaders. Pray that God gets to them in some way, shape, or form. Because obviously a lot of these folks, they may not be believing themselves. They may not be seeking God on their own, and so come together in prayer and ask God to make Himself obvious to them. Be willing to ask God to save them, and so they can, so they can be saved, because we don't want them to receive whatever fate is from them not believing. Obviously, we don't want them going to hell, so we shouldn't be praying for that. We should be praying that they are saved, and overall, because of that, things can get better. So I think that's important. I think it's an important takeaway from all this, is that we need to be praying for our leadership in this country. Despite their depravity, we should be praying for them, and earnestly praying for them. Not just like, oh, I guess we should pray for these folks,
Right.
But actually
In earnest.
yeah, in earnest, going to God saying, we want to see this person, and it doesn't hurt to even let them know that you're praying for them.
Right.
If you're that brave, let them know that you're praying for them. If you have connections to them, or if you're close, even if you disagree, let them know that you're praying for them. Let them know that you're wanting to see God work in their life and make an impact on them, and hopefully have them turn to Him. It's the only
hope we have. Yeah.
Yeah. We should be praying for them. We should be focused on God, and just continue to be pushing for truth and seeking after truth.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. There's really no other way to do it except for push for truth. I don't really see another way. You just have to relentlessly hound them with the truth.
Yeah. And really dig in, spend time in the Bible, really dig into there, and God will work through that and continue to work in you, and you'll find encouragement in it as well. But that's pretty much all we have for today. It's a quick show.
Yep.
I'll get this show and the last show up. I'm going to leave this in. I'm calling myself out. I didn't upload the last show. So let's, I'll do that, and we'll get this show up, and then hopefully we'll get another show in before you head out.
For sure. And that'll be a longer one. We'll really dig into some other stuff that we kind of had to skip over today.
Yeah. And it'll be another good show, and then we'll be on a bit of a hiatus until you get back again.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Well, without further ado, God bless
America.
Go and tell that midnight rider, tell the rambler, the gambler, the backbiter, tell him that God's gonna cut him down. Tell him that God's gonna cut him down. Well, my goodness gracious, let me tell you the news. My head's been wet with the midnight dew. I've been down on bended knee, talking to the man from Galilee. He spoke to me in a voice so sweet, I thought I heard the shuffle of angels' feet. He called my name when my heart stood still, when he said, man, go do my will. Go tell that long-tongued liar